Hey, my name is Inger, and I am one member on the Peralta Online Equity team. And I am here today to welcome you to this session at 12 o'clock on Friday, the third and final day of our conference. As many of you know, the days were set up as learn, analyze, and build. And so today's focus is really to focus on some of the skills and activities that are takeaways for participants to take with them. And a couple of logistics. We have auto captioning enabled. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little toggle that has CC. And if you tick that, you will be able to see the automatically generated captions from the session. We will edit those and improve them before we make the recording available at the end of the conference. Second, I wanted to let you know that we're using and encouraging people to use the chat feature for questions. We have 3 people doing this particular presentation, so I trust that they will be well able to keep their eye on the chat and direct questions to each other. As a way to start that, I would encourage you right now just to drop into the chat and type in perhaps where you're from, what college or university, what country, what time zone, so the presenters can learn a little bit about who's here in this event. And then with that, I will introduce you to Josie and Jessica and Reed from Pima Community College in Arizona and let them do more in-depth presentations of themselves. On your mark, get set, go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And we come to you from Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona, and looking at the chat, and I see people from all over. So hi, Caitlin and Joan and Laura, Patricia, Kayla, Tim, Sophia, Wynn, Zarin. So nice to have all of you here with us today.
I see Dr. Pittman, who gave a great presentation yesterday here. It's good to have such a large group, 47 people in the room so far.
Yes. Thank you so much. Greg, Shabella, Caleb. All right. Very cool. Well, we know that we're coming towards the end of our conference, and we are just wanting to talk about 3 ways of approaching equity. And before we do that, though, just take a moment. It's really been an intense week on many levels, and particularly the theme of this conference is equity, and in many ways it's kind of a sanctuary at such a difficult time to provide an opportunity like this during a week that's fraught with so much tension in relation to equity and our world. So use this moment as an opportunity just to, you can even close your eyes if you like, and just kind of situate yourself in this moment and check in, like really check in. And then allow yourself to land somewhere. Land on a word or a phrase, a sensation or a feeling. And then when you're ready, just go ahead and type it into the chat. Type whatever is the first word or phrase, sensation, emotion that comes to your mind. See open, friendship, intention, appreciation, grateful, exhausted, unfrenetic, hopeful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think gratitude, a lot of gratitude and hope. And those are areas and courage that I've been grasping onto this last week. Hope, appreciation, gratitude for colleagues, for so many different things. Gratitude for this opportunity to connect virtually across time and space with everyone here at the exact same time. So as we move forward, we are going to have several opportunities. We're going to ask and we're going to provide a few prompts to related to our presentation and ask that you contribute in the chat. You can feel free to do that or not, or feel free, of course, to contribute to the chat in any ways that you find meaningful. So I'm Josie, and my pronouns, I go by she, her. I'm writing faculty, a Pima online department head, associate instructional designer, faculty senate president, yoga meditation instructor, and my focus areas include open pedagogy, OER, agile, social justice, equity, and inclusion. And while we go to Jess and Reed, I'm going to put a link to our slides in the chat so that you can follow along and access the various links throughout the presentation or after.
Hi, folks. I'm Reed. I'm the program manager at Pima for faculty development, and I teach poetry writing and American poetry, among other things. Good to be with you.
Hola, zdravo, and hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Zeitler, and I go by Jess. I'm an instructional designer for Pima Online, Spanish faculty, long distance runner, foodie, and language nerd. And some of my interests include agile prototyping, equity and inclusion, student success, UDL, and UX design.
So before we launch into our 3 pillars, we wanted to offer a brief caveat and just note that we are here in the spirit of collaborative idea sharing to offer our own experiences based on our shared work at Pima Community College, an Hispanic serving institution in Tucson, Arizona. And along with it, the sense that by no means is what we are presenting meant to be considered comprehensive in any way. And we are hoping for this session to be an opportunity to learn from all of you so we can all learn from each other as we move forward. Areas we'll cover are equity in course design, equity in faculty development, equity in teaching practices, and then finally at the end, we want to turn it over to you to share your ideas. A quote we'd like to start off with is by Sonia Nieto from The Light in Their Eyes. Multicultural education and all good teaching is about transformation, individual, collective, and institutional. Each of these levels is needed to foster student learning. And you'll find the essence of this quote infused throughout our pieces and the entire presentation. So from here, we'll move to Jess.
Thank you, Josie. Be the reason everyone feels welcome, seen, heard, and valued. While this might feel like one of those cliche quotes, I share it because it means something to me. I have this quote hung on my wall above my computer as a small reminder that as a Spanish instructor for more than 15 years, that all of my students are deserving of these things. It is also a reminder, however, that we all play many roles in our daily lives, and our equitable and inclusive practices can impact all of those around us. So not just my role as Spanish faculty or instructional designer, but also as a mother and a wife, a friend, a colleague, a teammate, or even that random lady at the grocery store, that we all have opportunity to positively impact someone's life through equitable and inclusive practices. We are all here, however, to specifically talk about equitable and inclusive design. So the question I ask myself on a regular basis as I push to grow, learn, and reflect is, how do I model and foster equitable and inclusive practices from my role as an instructional designer? Next slide, please. Today, I'll be walking through some of the approaches to design for equity and inclusion. I tried to focus on a few specific items, so in no way is my 8-minute presentation all-inclusive. I'm here to learn and share, and I am so excited that we are doing this together here at the Peralta Conference. I have divided my presentation into 3 parts. I will explore frameworks, fostering equity and inclusion, focusing specifically on Agile, partnering with faculty, relationship building, and identifying and lowering barriers. And finally, equity and inclusion from the onset of design, including UDL and TILT. Next slide, please. I've made a Venn diagram of sorts, and you'll notice that I have identified some overlapping frameworks. While UDL has often been associated with equity and inclusion, as an Agile designer, I wanted to share a bit about the Agile mindset that lends itself to equitable and inclusive practices. One of the main 4 values of Agile development can be found in the Agile Manifesto. It is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This value serves as a foundation to the Agile mindset, prioritizing collaboration and teamwork, seen through self-organizing teams and flexible roles and responsibilities. This is a flattening of the hierarchy of sorts, in team dynamics, as well as could be used in the classroom. Transparency and trust, seen through transparent and inclusive run projects, which foster trust, and a desire to learn and continuously improve, which creates a safe and supportive space for failure, growth, and improvement. And I'm sure we're all seeing this overlap with the growth mindset in Carol Dweck. I believe these characteristics are essential to equitable design because they foster an equitable and inclusive work environment with our colleagues and design teams, but in an iterative fashion, also support approaches that can be implemented from the design phase into the class itself. This Agile collaboration starts with partnering with faculty for course development. Next slide, please. One of the most essential parts of my role as an instructional designer is developing a relationship with my faculty subject matter expert, or my SME. The faculty SME is the person that helps me contextualize the pain points that are often, that they often have to reteach or offer additional resources and tutorials. As instructors, we've all been there. As I start on this journey of course development and getting to know the SME, I like to first learn about the SME through an early get to know you meeting and questionnaire. I not only ask the SME why they started studying the subject or what are some of the elements they're most passionate about, and if and how they get to share that in the classroom, but also we get to explore questions of equity and inclusion, like how often are students given the opportunity to learn about diverse races, ethnicities, and cultures, or how often are students encouraged to think more deeply about race-related topics? Are there options for assignments or projects to work as an individual or group? These items let students know about choice. This meeting and questionnaire, again, provide a lot of insight on how the SME sees and engages with the material and the students, as well as plants a seed to continue to explore equity within the classroom as we start our design. One thing I will say that I have added and continuously improved in collaboration with my colleagues is a course development checklist that uses the Agile approach. So as we learn and improve, it continues to integrate more equity and inclusion items. While we also use a rubric that integrates equity and inclusion practices as part of the review process at the end of the development, as a designer, I am a checklist person. So I want to front load my course developments with the most important items so they're not left to the end as an afterthought. To learn more about the course and connect with the faculty experience and the course with the students, I utilize 3 elements of design thinking: empathize, divine, and ideate. We try to empathize with the users. In this case, this means the students and the faculty. We have to remember that faculty have to use the course as well. So asking questions like, who are they? What are their challenges? Are you working with an adjunct who is teaching in multiple schools and has limited time, or more than 40 students in one class? Or the common student of today at the community college who's possibly working full-time, taking care of multiple generations of a family and trying to complete a degree, all on their mobile phone? Then thinking about defining. So we need to define users' needs as maybe working or first generation, or parents or non-traditional, or the problems they might be experiencing in the course. And then finally, ideate, by challenging assumptions and creating ideas for innovative solutions. Defining problems and identifying barriers is part of the design thinking. In addition to faculty insight, when available, we can and should review data analytics from our LMS to help pinpoint those places where students are struggling. So the combination of partnering with the SME to identify the pain points that only a faculty would know, and using data analytics from the course can serve to give the design team a starting point in identifying some of the learner challenges, and thus collaborate to lower some of those barriers. And I want to pause for a second and pose a question to you that maybe you can throw in the chat. What are some of the challenges that you face when working with instructional designers or faculty SMEs, or just general challenges that you face when designing a course? Next slide, please.
And again, as she progresses, anything you want to put into the chat feed, that would be fantastic to see. Just to repeat the question, anything that you face as a challenge working with an instructional designer, or if you are an instructional designer working with faculty, SMEs, subject matter experts in designing a course.
Thank you, Reed. Questions. Some of the questions that I'm constantly thinking about is who is not thriving? Who are we serving poorly in our classes? Is there an educational technology that supports lowering this barrier? And is it easily accessible to students and faculty? Can structure and design or a framework help resolve some of these challenges? To address some of these questions from the beginning of the development, I front load my course developments and ideate process with the most important tools that often solve problems before they occur. And this includes accessibility. So a few tools that support equity and inclusion that are becoming part of best practices are using UDL and TILT. Well, there are 3 pillars of UDL. The 2 that I partner most often with my SME include the +1 approach, adding an additional representation of content, offering options to students to learn material like written or video with captions, and multiple pathways to action and expression, providing students options to demonstrating their knowledge and grasp of the material and meeting the close. The +1 approach encourages us to think about offering options, flexibility, choice, and it is a great support for students in all subjects. I will add that, that providing captions has become easier in the last year, not only because of the advancements of technology, but also I feel very lucky because at Pima Community College, we were able to hire a digital media producer that has facilitated and encouraged the use of videos in classes and has been very supportive in captioning these videos, and that's been great. TILT, Transparency in Learning and Teaching, with Mary Ann Wilkinson, Mary Ann Winkelmess, the founder and the principal investigator at TILT Higher Ed. She introduced the transparent framework that pushes us as designers and faculty to consider that providing simple items such as purpose, task, and criteria for assignments within the course offers students an opportunity not only to connect with the material, but also have a clear understanding of how this knowledge might relate to their lives or careers in the future. As I finish, I would like to point out that the design process can be very challenging, but with the help of modern tools, frameworks to organize content and approach, and most importantly, faculty, it can be so very rewarding. I'm happy at this point to hand it off to Reed, who will be talking about faculty development.
Reed, you're muted.
Hi, folks. Lovely to be with you. I'm Reed Dickson. Pleasure to be speaking with you today about faculty development for equity. In particular, we're going to be looking at some frames for inquiry and how do we support faculty inquiry as they reflect on their practice. As for my background, again, I'm the program manager for faculty development at Pima, where I also teach a variety of subjects. I come out of K-12 and I used to do teacher ed work at Teachers College. And I love bridging. I love connecting people and their values with what they're doing. That includes my students as well as faculty that I'm working with. So I want to begin with a quote from Paulo Freire, which talks about the teacher-student contradiction. I think it's an unanswerable question, but it's one that persists as a lens with everything that I do, where we think about how do we shift or reconcile the poles of the contradiction so that both are simultaneously teachers and students. It's a tricky concept, but again, teacher and student, how do we subordinate teaching to learning? How do we help students co-construct knowledge with us and make them partners in learning and praxis? So for today, I'm going to be looking at a quick range of reflective practices and prompts. We'll start off here with recentering prompts, rethinking prompts relating to building rapport and community building. How do we rethink engagement? How do we get faculty to rethink their assessment practices that they may believe in, but they haven't really had a moment to just pause and think about? How do we help them rethink our scaffolding approaches and accessibility in general? And also, how do we rethink our role in providing student support services as faculty? So a couple of examples around recentering education practices. I like to begin with what we love. I think it's a very easy way to begin with our faculty to say, well, what do you already love about teaching? There's all kinds of prompts we can use, but building upon positive face-to-face experiences is critical for folks that are suddenly thrust into virtual or fully online environments. So I might pose a question like, share something you love to do in the face-to-face class. We actually include this in our Introduction to Online Pedagogy course now. Here's an example where I did a quick video, and thank you again to Kayla Shaw, who's in the group, who did the video recording of this. I gave Michael a short script with a couple of questions. Michael Amick is our vice president for online, and he just posed a simple question. What do you love to do about face-to-face teaching? Then share. And the question was, how do we move towards parallel practices? Staying with that route about what we love. As we proceed, I'm going to ask you probably to share a little bit as well in the chat feed. Again, you'll see the chat feed in the lower right corner of your Zoom window. Whatever comes to mind, share it. We're all experts in a wide range of experiences, so please share. One of my favorite prompts is a belief prompt. What do we fundamentally believe about teaching and learning, especially in the online environment? So let's take a moment here. You'll see in the chat feed, I want you to finish the sentence. This is kind of like a sentence start. I believe, and I want to know what you fundamentally believe about teaching and learning. Just one thing, whatever comes to mind you feel is really important. It can be in the online context or in general, but one thing you really believe matters. And I want to see what comes up into the chat feed as we go. If it helps, I have some sub prompts that you can think about, like, what do you believe about helping students connect? Is it important to you that all your students connect with your course and your learning? Does growth matter to you in terms of, are you a constructivist? Do you believe in empowerment? Are you wanting students to read the world and read the word, as Paulo Freire would say? What do you think is the point of assessment and how does it become equitable? Whatever comes to mind, I want to see what you're putting in the chat feed, and I want to read back what you're putting into the chat feed as well, or maybe Jessica or Josie might, if you can see the chat feed here with us.
Yes, we have a lot of fantastic ideas here. We reach students as much through their hearts as through their minds. From Kathy Swart, authenticity. From Teresa, we have, I believe that if I am authentic with my students, that they will be authentic with me, and that we will co-teach and learn together. From Teresa Aldredge. So many fantastic about relationships and inclusiveness, partnering, a lot of decentered ideas. Everyone is from, this is from Brooke Anderson, also from Pima. Hi, Brooke. Brooke says, I believe everyone is doing their best and that it is hard to remember this. Yes. Engagement.
So please keep sharing as we go. I only have a short little presentation here, but I am noticing, for example, Dr. Pittman is talking about relevance. We need to as she says, I believe we have to teach students in relation to their reason for being here. Andragogy Theory 101, they need to have a clear sense of relevance. And keep sharing your ideas, please, as we move to the chat feed. So I'd like to begin with love and belief, and we build that into our Introduction to Online Pedagogy courses. I also, when I've worked with adult ed faculty, have just gone to Learning Center and just done a quick 10-minute brainstorm where they make a list of the core beliefs, and then we bring them together and create kind of a collective shared vision piece, which is often, there's a lot of overlapping areas. So I'll categorize those around what is a common belief that can really reinforce the esprit de corps within that group of faculty. Moving forward further still, again, the work is about beliefs and our love, but it's also about thinking about what is the theory that's out there and how does that intersect with practice, which my friend Jeff Baker introduced me to when I first started working at Teachers College. Praxis. How do we interrogate theory through practice and vice versa? And one thing I like to do is to give folks a survey of core beliefs. What do you strongly believe about all kinds of things? I've only got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to speed through these, but if you want to pose questions or ideas in the chat feed, please do. This is an example that I'll share with you about a quote that I like, and I have hundreds of quotes. I probably should moderate a educational quote blog, but I just don't know how to blog yet, so that's a skill I need to learn. This is a quote from Bell Hooks. I entered the classroom with a conviction that it was crucial for me and every other student to be an active participant, not a passive consumer, of education as the practice of freedom, education that connects the will to know with the will to become. I ask folks to complete little surveys, and I've done this everywhere I've worked, whether it's K-12 or whether it's undergrad STEM educators, whether it's Pima faculty, whether it's Teachers College graduate students. To start with, what do you fundamentally believe, by giving them a bunch of ideas? It might be constructivist ideas, it might be introducing them to Vygotsky and the whole canon, or it might be focused specifically on equity questions, even 3 questions. I would like to know from you, if you agree with this quote, put it in the chat feed. Write the word agree, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. It's a quick prompt that gets folks familiar with concepts they might not have had a chance to consider, especially in higher education, which has no traditional teacher education path. We see TLCs popping up and things shifting, but I want to know how you feel. And again, keep in mind the idea that you can do something similar. You can gather a series of quotes and let folks decide where they stand on those positions, even using in a face-to-face environment, what do you call it? I forget the term, where you have everybody go to the back of the room and they do a, they stand where they believe, this side of the room, that side of the room. If you're face-to-face, folks, that's a fun activity to do. So moving on forward, and I'm going to fly through these final pieces. Again, our faculty are busy. So perhaps just proposing a few questions or things that they can say, well, what do they believe, or coming up with their own ideas, and then letting them have short micro discussions with their peers. In our classes, we build in micro discussions, 3 sentences long or video based, where they do a quick post on what they believe to try to simulate a dynamic, interactive face-to-face environment. So I'm going to walk through these 5 different approaches in about the next 2 minutes. We'll be somewhat quick. One thing I like to think about and have faculty think about is, how do we build rapport from the first week of school? How do we build upon and know our students' funds of knowledge? How do we create a safe space that's supportive? These kinds of questions we're not going to talk about a lot in the chat feed, but if anything comes to mind you think is a good resource, please throw it into the chat feed. Again, we like to begin with, how do we know? What processes can we use in any discipline to know our students and their funds of knowledge? We're not giving them the answers immediately. We begin with the question. How can we support equity and inclusion from the virtual front door is a more specific question. And here's an example of a teaching artifact that one of our faculty, Ana Jimenez, shared with me, where she creates a virtual front door. Isn't that gorgeous? I'm so impressed with it, because what it does is it makes me feel welcome. It makes me feel like I know that I'm included. It's also normalizing the practice of seeking out a tutor, seeking out counseling. There's a sense of inclusion. There's even a safe zone sticker in the corner, that rainbow triangle in the corner that you'll notice. There's study room. Everything that she values is normalized and visible and accessible, and she's smiling, opening the door to welcome me in. What a beautiful space. So we like to use teaching artifacts to help people think what you might do and how you might change this in your own teaching. In terms of rethinking engagement and letting students become partners in learning and praxis, I like beginning with the data. I'm not going to talk about these 3 items much, but just to say we have data, you have data. Begin with what the students are telling you. Josie's going to revisit this question of student data in her presentation. Furthermore, rethinking assessment. You know, a lot of folks, unfortunately, are still doing this branding of the student as excellent or awful, have a nice day, rather than thinking about how does assessment help us grow. So posing questions relating to assessment for growth. Wiggins and McTee from Backward Design talk about when does assessment advance learning? Furthermore, the question of help or hurt. I teach a class called Rethinking Rubrics where we ask, when do rubrics help or hurt our students? Beginning with the questions in mind. We also assign readings that are scholarly readings where they can go in and have a shared discussion around a shared text and do text-dependent inquiry where they highlight pieces of text and have debates about things because there aren't necessarily simple answers, but the questions do persist and inspire. Also rethinking scaffolding for assessment in UDL. How do we promote metacognition? How do we promote digital accessibility? What small steps can we do to support metacognition? And if you have a step you love to support metacognition, please throw it in the chat feed. I have one that I love, which is just asking folks to include a brief note at the end of whatever they submit on what they liked about what they submitted, what they would like to improve if they could, if they had more time. Again, we do scenario-based discussion prompts as well in terms of what is our role in helping absent students and helping students persist that have dropped off, in supporting all kinds of pieces. I'm going to have to jump through these because I'm out of time. But in closing up, even the role of our responsibility as educators is not just to teach, it's to support student support services and direct them towards how to use the tech. Just like a chemistry teacher teaches you how to use the lab equipment, we have to teach the tech, whether we like it or not. We need to begin by helping teachers claim this question and own it. That's the heart of it. My final notes, letting faculty do the work. We let faculty analyze tools and use equity as a frame and as a lens for the tools they're analyzing. We are only talking about a tiny little bit as it relates to prompt-based inquiry, but I would strongly recommend Kay Novak's presentation from yesterday. I think Kevin did a presentation on microaggressions as well. This specific one had fantastic prompts that are scenario-based for and thinking about microaggression. Finally, if you're bored on Tuesday, I'll be doing a workshop at noon, Tucson time, 3 o'clock Eastern, on how to personalize your course room or course classroom. It's D2L specific, but it is kind of broader than hopefully. And if you want to stay connected, there is my contact info. I'll put it into the chat feed. We're going to switch over to Josie Milliken, who's going to share her screen and then continue the presentation from there. Josie, you're muted.
That's the theme of the week. I have done that 5 times and read you as well. So it's the theme of the week, unmuted. Muted. So we are moving into our teaching for equity and inclusion section of our presentation. And from here, I'd like to discuss 3 main areas. 1 is enabling collectivist learning. 2 is offering choices. And 3 is decentralizing the classroom. So if you look at this map, this is dimension maps of the world, and there's a link to it if you would like to see the original source. And this map is each dimension has been derived by comparing many, not all countries in the world, but many. And so it's a bit oversimplified, but the findings are summarized into 6 world maps based on distribution of collectivist or individualist cultures. So the deeper purple areas are areas representing more of an individualist culture. And then as you get into a lighter purple, those areas are much more collectivist in approach. And the difference is that collectivist cultures are formed mostly around mutual support, aid, and reciprocity. They're formed around selflessness, putting community needs before individual needs, and focusing on what is best for society and common goals. So those are just a few. And you can see, of course, that there's a lot of overlap. A lot of areas have a variety of those or a mixture, but take note of where we are and how dark of a purple we are in that individualist area. And so individualist is the focus on I, individualist goals, not common goals, but individualist. Dependency is often seen as shameful. So the dominant culture, so this is the dominant Western American culture here, influences so many aspects of teaching, curriculum design, classroom design. You can see it in how our learning management systems are structured to enable a very individualist approach to learning. Students from collectivist cultures can easily feel left out and isolated, and often, at least at Pima Community College, students who tend to be our minority students, or the students who have the most difficult time achieving student success, are those from these cultures that are more collectivist. They tend to be more disenfranchised or minority cultures. And so when we think about how to promote equity in education, we have to step outside of whatever mindset we might come from, heavily influenced by whatever areas we were raised in or how we were raised, and think about how would it be to have your whole manner of thinking and being come to a total clash in terms of what's expected you in a classroom community. So you can see where there's a friction there that isn't quite enabling the equity and the student success that we want to facilitate. And so with this focus on this focus on the individual, our students feel left out, and we value and talk about collaboration, but collaboration lacks the mutual support and why they often break down. And so I'm guessing many of you probably have taught and offered group assignments. And you can type this in the chat, but what is the main problem that always causes a disruption in terms of how those group projects actually work out? Students fear lack of accountability for peers, from Colleen Harmon, thank you. Not all students can participate in group work due to other obligations. Thank you, Kevin Kelly. Yes, perceived unfairness for peers, Teresa Aldridge. And so what are all those fears? From what culture are those fears deriving? It's from the familiarity with more of a collectivist culture. And you often find, I'm worried about my points. How are my points going to be impacted by my participation in a group? It so often comes down to those points, that I-focused points. And so what can we do? And I'd love to hear your ideas. So I'm hoping that you share ideas about how to bridge these divides here, how to cross over this gap. So some ways we might offer, depending on the circumstances, include affinity groups, facilitating based on affinities, based on subject areas, based on ethnicity, based on all of these different things, allowing students to let you know, or us know, what affinities they would like to be grouped by. Cohort groups, peer groups, ways to provide that mutual support, if not within the context of the classroom, outside of it. Learners working together in communities, using the community term more than teams because of the element of competitiveness associated with the word teams, using we instead of I, offer lists for optional community groups, avoid having a majority of points or a large amount of points assigned to group activities, and instead maybe offer them pass fail, so there's not that concern about points. And so all different sorts of things, and looking forward to seeing what other ideas. Give students control, yes, how to meet, from Greg Kaminsky. Start groups after the first week. So many good ideas. So here, this comes back to what Jess was talking about, is UDL. And we know the basic framework of UDL, but we often don't really dig into it. And so we have engagement, we have representation, and we have action/expression. I made them into 4 little quadrants here for the purpose of, well, I think action and expression can actually be differentiated, but also because I wanted a more balanced presentation on this slide. So when we look at engagement, and I'm hoping that you'll share ideas in the chat. So engagement really looks at what other methods of engagement could be offered to heighten interest, sustain effort, and motivate. And I'm going to go quickly through these for the purpose of time. And so representation, what alternative ways can this content be represented to heighten perception and comprehension? Action, what are methods? What are some varying methods for action? How can we give our students these choices? Expression, what are methods for action, expression, and communication? So this graphic here links to the UDL guidelines, and it's worth taking some time and maybe having brainstorming groups with colleagues, perhaps even students, and actually digging in, because there is so much here, and we often just keep our focus on these top tiers up above. And so if we gaze down, we can see there are so many other areas to look at. And they actually all link to other resources. So one example I wanted to share is from a colleague here at Pima Community College, Liz Rangel Areola. And this project choice board, Liz actually found this on an open site and modified it, and she's offered for us to actually share it as well, so you can all use it and borrow. And you can see how beautifully designed it is and how it offers students these choice. They could do a TED Talk or a movie, and then there's a link to the specific instructions related to that choice. And so you can see multiple methods of expression, and you can also see multiple methods of presentation illustrated here by the layout of this this document, and how it's visually pleasing and how it uses text and links. So last slide is facilitating meaningful learning experiences. This is an area where we want to turn it over to you to get your ideas, in addition to what you've already shared. And but it really often comes back to renewable assignments. I absolutely love open pedagogy. I'm a big proponent of it, and renewable assignments as opposed to disposable assignments, the assignments that students are not ever going to come back to or may not ever open that file again, but instead ones that actually are meaningful to them. Those are the kinds of assignments that engage students and make them feel more invested as they become co-creators of the learning experience. I can tell from the chat so many comments about decentering the classroom and inviting students to become co-learners. We all, as a community, are learning and constructing knowledge. So I wanted to share on this week, we at Pima got some results from our 2020 online student feedback project. And so we have this resource, and you're welcome to take a look. It's linked to our slides, but you can see there's a lot of information here, and you can just dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you can find all of these student comments for what works for them and what doesn't. And some comments that I wanted to share related to suggestions our students have for faculty is classes can be more motivating through smarter design, assignments that apply to us as an individual and our real life application that engage our creativity, applying to us. Understanding how learning skills in one class affects your success. So relating the assignments to success, connecting students to the outside world, and so on. And all of these different areas relate to that idea of how can this assignment be meaningful? How can this content be meaningful and applicable to my life? So we have a group activity, and I did hear from from Kevin Kelly that we do have a few extra minutes here, but we do have to be out because several minutes before 1 to allow the next presentation to come in. So we understand if you have to leave, but if you're able to stay, we'd love it if you'd participate in a really quick breakout and group activity. So from here, you'll see a link to flip charts. And once you open that, you'll see a prompt. And I'm going to turn it back over to Reed, or Reed is actually going to assign the breakout groups, and we can put a link to this in the chats if there's not already a link already. And what you'll do in groups, and this is all described in the slide, the flip chart, is you'll consider the feedback the students offered, particularly in relation to how they value learning experiences that relate to their success and lives outside the classroom. Based on what we've discussed today and what you've learned throughout this conference, how might you adjust your methods and create more equitable, meaningful, and engaging learning experiences for them?
So you'll see in the chat feed, I've put together a link to our virtual flip chart paper, if you will. Note-taking spaces. When we go into breakout groups, there'll be a page for each group. Feel free to take notes and share ideas within that tool. We'll also link to it from the Padlet. If you have issues with connecting, just please stay in the main room and I'll make sure that you're connected. We're creating 8 breakout rooms now automatically. And please
sorry to interrupt. So
sure.
I don't know if we have time to jump into breakout rooms now, since we are only 10 minutes from the next session, but we can start the cogs a turning and get everybody thinking in this great space. And hopefully we can use that Padlet area to take this to the next level.
Sure.
But I just want to respect that we do have somebody else who's going to start very soon. And if we're all in breakout rooms, it'll be very difficult for us to herd all the cats back into the same space.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
it's
I'll
very
put the-
true. And
I'll
we can
put
do
the
it.
Padlet in the chat. Because we
So
would
we
love
can-
to capture either through your flip charts or also in the Padlet, capture the stuff that you've just got everybody.
That works for us. That would be super helpful.
That
So
works.
please
And
take a look at.
Instead, what we can do is we'll just make it. We'll take a plan B, and we'll switch to an alternative method, and we'll just have everybody individually consider everything that we've discussed today, and place it into the shareable artifact that we can all consider and consult as a resource after the presentation. And then we'll, as we see all of those different contributions populate into the Padlet, we'll take a look and close here in about maybe 2 minutes. Can we have two minutes more, Inger and Kevin?
The Padlet actually stays open, so people could go into the Padlet and it will be an archive of their contributions and the stuff that you've got them saying.
Great, thank you so much. So you'll see here when you come to the Padlet, Scott Ham has already posted. Thank you, please come into the same space. And again, Josie, if you could repeat the prompt for them on what to share in this tool within the Padlet.
Yes, I'll paste it into the chat and I'll also read it. So we are asking, consider the feedback the students offered, particularly in relation to how they value learning experiences that relate to their success and lives outside the classroom. Based on what we've discussed today and what you've learned throughout this conference, how might you adjust your methods and create more equitable, meaningful, and engaging learning experiences for them? And we need to close because we need to be considerate of the next presenters and we want to attend their presentation as well. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your ideas. I learned so much. I so appreciate your contributions. I hope to see you in the future. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yes, and with that, I'll close it up. Sirwa, thank you for participating with us. And I'm going to hit stop record, which will formally end our session. Be sure to join us in the subsequent sessions. We're busy all the way through the afternoon up till 6 o'clock tonight. Thank you so much.